friends, I'm Reverend Nate Melcher of Richfield United Methodist Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and welcome to Camp Meetings. I'm so glad that you're here. The name Camp Meetings comes from the camp meetings that brought isolated people together to build faith and community. That's why we're here. This is the season of Pentecost, and we are on the Pentecouch. All summer long, we're going to explore how to get active for change in the world, both from and off the couch. Tonight's guest is Mitch Biebighauser. He is a federal public defender, and he's joining us to talk about racial disparities in our criminal justice system. But first, new drinks. This summer on the Pentecost, I'll be showcasing a special cup in my home and trying a beverage I've never drank before. Tonight's cup is a Father's Day gift cup I got, and it's, surprise, surprise, another Star Wars cup. That's 3 for 3. This is a cool one, friends. This has the X-Wing on the side. It has Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. It's actually Luke in R2. You can see that, so it's red 5. And it's perfect for going to the swimming pool. It's plastic, it's not glass. It has this fake ice in it that's, I don't know, insulation. But what I like about it is you don't lose the straw because it has an extra piece of plastic on the inside to keep the straw from getting lost. Right there. The future is here. So our new drink tonight is Ocean Spray Cran Grape Juice. To my recollection, I've never actually drank this. I've used it for communion before, but I've never gulped it to take a big swig and to see what is it like as just a drink. So I'm curious to see, will this be more cran or grape? What's going to really stick out? Is it the sour of the cran or the sweet of the grape? We're going to find out right after this song from Victor.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Camp Meetings. I hope you're all doing well. In these crazy times, don't forget to wash your hands and wear your mask. I'm going to start us off with a wonderful song by Holly Near, and I want to thank Holly for giving us permission to stream this song. It's called We Are a Gentle, Angry People. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing for our lives. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing for our lives. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people. We are singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing for our lives.
All right, friends, time to find out for cran grape juice what's going to come out more, the sour of the cran or the sweet of the grape. Here we go. It's the cranberry. It's really tart, and I don't even know if there's grape in there. Hey kid, how you doing? Want to try this? Okay.
Yummy.
Kid approved. Friends, if you have a good, unique drink idea, you can leave it in the comments. And I'm going to invite you to pray the breakthrough prayer of Richfield United Methodist Church. May this prayer inspire you to partner with the Holy Spirit in your life. We're going to have your sister pray it, okay?
Yeah, I'm going to go tell her.
Oh, okay.
Hi, church. Let's do the breakthrough prayer. Loving God of all, renew our hearts and minds, reveal your wildest dreams, break through to each of us, unite us in your vision, equip us for your work, transform us by your song, create our harmony. May we embrace your future and be your living church. Amen.
Thanks, Gertie. Each week on the Pentacouch, we have new ways to live in Pentecost in our hearts, on fire, partnering with the Holy Spirit to bring change to the world. Now, 2 episodes ago on this program, I mentioned to you that if you open your Bible, you're going to find over 2,000 scripture verses about poverty and justice. So you can have those in your back pocket when you're talking about faith and trying to overcome poverty in our world. However, I said that you could visit sojo.net to see that whole list, and then I forgot to put up the actual specific link. So I want to make sure that you get it here. There it is. Wow. I've never interacted with a link I put on a screen before, but there it is. Okay. So pause it, copy that down. You're going to want to go and get that list. Last week, I mentioned the Digital Mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington for their Digital Justice Gathering from the Poor People's Campaign. It's this rally cry that was with and on behalf of the 140 million poor and low-income people across the United States who are hurting right now. And the broadcast last Saturday was so good, friends. It was exciting, it was humbling, it was empowering, and it was filled with demands from a broad spectrum of people who are experiencing marginalization and oppression. And you must hear their voices, friends. They demand to be heard, and they should. And so I really encourage you to go and see that. The broadcast is still available for you to see. You can go and watch the archive anytime. Please go to june2020.org and you can watch that. Friends, you may have noticed that so far we have used couch puns on Sneak Attack Puns for the Camp Meetings episode of Pentacouch. And I want to say it too, as somebody who was just drinking juice on the Pentacouch, if one of these puns was so funny that you spilled a drink on your couch, I am sorry about that, and I hope you've recovered. That was tonight's Sneak Attack Pun. Sneak Attack Puns are not brought to you by 3M Scotch Long Lasting Storage Packing Tape. 3M, we're on a roll. This week I would be at Life Camp at Northern Pines in Park Rapids, Minnesota for a week of building faith and community with amazing young people from all across the state. But in the pandemic, that's just not going to happen, and I miss it so much. We had just started working on a theme for this year's camp. It's going to center around identity, and then it became clear that camp is not going to happen. Of all the themes we've done, we put them into a t-shirt in the recent years, and my favorite theme is also my favorite shirt, and it's this one. And it's I Am Enough. This is from 2016, and of all the Life Camp shirts that I wear, this is the one that people stop me on the street because they want to learn more. And isn't that gorgeous? My friend Molly, who used to be one of our leaders, she hand drew this, and it just turned out wonderful. But people want to know, where does that shirt come from? Tell me more about this message, I am enough. And I think it's because people are hungry to hear that they are enough. It's something that we don't often tell ourselves. Maybe we should. Maybe we think, well, what can I do? I'm just one person. Or, oh, what can I do? I've screwed up so much. Or how can I be loved? I'm so broken. All those kind of broken record reframes that we put into our head. In some of the gospel accounts, when Jesus approaches some fishermen to become his disciples, it says that they instantly drop their nets and they go. It's kind of like robots, right? But in the Gospel of Luke, we get a little something extra. Simon Peter has been working all night. He didn't catch a bite when he was fishing. And then Jesus comes along and says, let's go fishing together. And this time, Simon Peter lets down his nets, and then the catch is huge. And Simon Peter is amazed by what's going on, but he's hesitant. He thinks I think he sees himself as maybe too broken to be a part of what Jesus is doing, and he says to Jesus, "Get away from me, I'm not worthy." And that actually is not very robotic. That's very human. And then Jesus tells him, "No, Simon Peter," he says, "do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching people." Jesus says to him, "You are enough." And Jesus says to all of us, "You are enough." So friends, if you need to hear that one more time, let me say it now. You are enough. And may we go into this world being able to say about ourselves. I am enough, knowing that we're enough for Jesus. And Jesus says, don't be afraid. Let's go fishing. Amen.
Friends, our guest tonight is an assistant federal public defender with the Kansas district in the Wichita area. I've known this guy for a long time. He's a great guy. We want to hear his opinion and his thoughts on what's going on with racial disparities in our criminal justice system. His spouse just had a baby less than 2 weeks ago, so he might fall asleep during the interview. Friends, welcome our friend Mitch Biebighauser. Welcome, Mitch.
Thank you. Hi, Nate.
Glad to have you. You have a nice long title. I love that.
Yes, I've been grooming it over a very short career.
Can you tell us in a nutshell, as an assistant federal public defender, what is a public defender and where does the federal piece come into that?
So a public defender in general is a attorney who represents clients who are indigent, clients that can't pay to hire their own attorney. Those are divided up into different jurisdictions. So I'm a federal public defender in the District of Kansas. That means that I represent individuals that can't afford an attorney, that are accused of committing federal felonies. And so every 3 weeks, everybody in the Wichita area accused of committing a federal felony becomes my client.
How many people is that every 3 weeks?
Oh, between 0 and 5, probably.
Okay. So this would be like on the TV shows when they say, you're reading the Miranda rights. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you by the court, and that'd be you.
Yes, believe it or not, that part's real.
So tell us a little bit about that work. What is that like on a day-to-day basis?
Day-to-day is doing a lot of fact analysis for government reports, and every accusation comes with something called discovery. Requesting discovery is the information that the government's going to use to prosecute the individual. So their reports from police officers, forensic reports, correspondence between a prosecutor and a federal agent, perhaps, reviewing those things to understand what the government's claims are and what evidence they have to prosecute those claims, and then translating that into some sort of analysis that I can give a client of mine about the strength of the government's accusations, whether they have enough evidence to make their case, whether they have enough evidence to make a similar but less penalizing case perhaps, and then determining whether or not the government's properly charged a crime, whether they've properly investigated the crime, whether a person's personal or property rights have been violated in a way that violates the Constitution, that they've entered into their home without a warrant, that they've been stopped without cause, analyzing the case for those legal defenses and presenting those factual and legal defenses to the client to make a decision about whether or not they want to go to trial, whether they want to work out a plea agreement, or whether or not they want to make an issue out of some way that they were unconstitutionally treated.
That's like dozens of options or ways to go. I mean, that sounds exhausting. I mean, for a client, I can't imagine.
Yeah. I do my best to present a limited selection of options or a scale of options for my client, and help them make the best decision they can. Unfortunately, we're often in a position where every decision is hard. Every decision is likely to result in a negative scenario, and so it's making the best worst case decision typically, and it is exhausting and challenging, especially when you're doing that disconnected from your family because you're currently in jail. Your calls are being recorded, so talking to them about the nitty gritty and the details is difficult, which stresses out their family, and so doing that isolated with an attorney that's trying to help but you don't know, puts us in the role of counselor a lot too, as we're just trying to help somebody make a decision as part of the job.
Yeah. Is the timeline different for that kind of a case as opposed to if they had their own representation in some other way?
Always the same generally. There's a federal statute that requires people to be brought to trial within 70 days if they want to. That is rarely invoked, and typically people are given about as much time as they need.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to speak with you about this is you've recently been using your social media platform to post what appears to be simply cold hard facts about criminal justice as a system in our country right now. And what I found is that you've been posting like here's a fact, and then you'll have a link for a resource for where you're finding that. And then you'll have this statement, this is wrong. So some of the things that you've been posting lately are things like prosecutors remove twice as many potential black jurors at trial as white jurors, 20% of available black jurors versus 10% of available white jurors. You said judges remove 14% of available black jurors compared with 10% of available white jurors. And then you got things in here about convictions regarding like drug convictions. 88% of federal crack cocaine convictions are of black Americans, and crack offenders are the most likely drug offenders, 71% to be subject to federal mandatory and minimum penalties at sentencing. And somewhere else you were saying that crack cocaine is the same drug as it's cocaine, right?
Yeah. So here's a metaphor about that that makes it maybe a little easier to swallow or understand. So crack and cocaine are the same drug. Imagine if we were going to write a law about, I was just thinking about this as I was gardening today. Imagine if we were going to write a law about punishing alcohol because we wanted to stop DUIs. And we decided a shot of tequila means you're going to go to prison for a year. But if you drank a martini, you're going to go to prison for 10 years. Well, a martini and a shot of alcohol are really the same. You've ingested the same substance, and it wouldn't make sense that the person that committed the same wrong, driving while intoxicated, is punished more harshly because they committed that offense drinking a martini than a shot of alcohol. And that's really the disparity between crack and cocaine, is that crack is just a way of mixing, diluting, and in some ways strengthening cocaine to get us a different high. And yet they're punished separately. And it just so happens that martini drinkers or our crack users in the metaphor are predominantly, overwhelmingly black and punished harsher, as that's drug is more often found in those communities.
Okay. Well, and that feeds into one of the other stats you recently shared, which is in 2017, black people represent 12% of the U.S. population, adult population, and 33% of the sentenced prison population. And each time that you post these, you also, as I said, you post this link of where you're finding this data, and then you say this sentence, this is wrong. And I've not seen a single one of these occurrences where you posted, I'm going, well, maybe it's not so wrong. Like, they all seem terrible.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about your understanding, your experience of racial disparities in our criminal justice system as we try to look at all this in a big picture way?
Yeah. First, to tackle sort of the message that I'm trying to present is that I'm trying to do this in a way that presents some fact to make up for a feeling that there are wrong things in the system, things are happening, and empower people to have at least a soundbite or a place to go back and say, hey, I remember I read something about that. You know, Mitch put this up. I can go find this or find an article or whatever to back up the feeling that we have that something's wrong. And
they talk about like truthiness, like, well, it feels like this.
Right.
Giving people an actual fact that they can rely on.
Right. And so just to present a resource and present a fact, there's so much information out there that I try and find sources. And a lot of times the ones I'm presenting are sources from the United States Sentencing Commission, which is the commission that writes the federal sentencing guidelines, or nationwide studies. The study you mentioned about black jurors being kicked off of juries is actually a study of the population of North Carolina. But I try and present sources that are not even news articles or not, the Atlantic or the New York or anything, but a real study. So but really to answer your question about my experiences. So I work as a federal public defender, but I work in a rural part of the state of Kansas. And so there's certainly gentrification in our community, and we see a lot of black defendants, but not as many as you might see in places like New York or Atlanta or something like that, just because of the demographics of our area. One which makes it challenging when we get defendants who are black defendants who we try and present in sentencing and raise these issues of disparity and problems, because it happens so infrequently. And anecdotally, I think it makes it easier for prosecutors and judges and people making decisions to write it off as being, well, it can't be systemic because I've only dealt with this 3 times. And so I don't see it enough for it to be an ongoing problem. It's easier to take it individual by individual and not notice a pattern and not notice a trend.
Wow. So I don't know how much you're able to speak about particular cases, but how have you seen that manifest in any cases, if you can share any?
Yeah, so one example would be a sentencing hearing I had about a year ago where I was presenting a story of an individual about a number of things about their life, their mental health, their childhood, and one of the things about them was their race, as a black male. And this individual, being a black male, had been through some challenges that white folks don't. One of the things I mentioned and was my very first post on Facebook and was the way I began this hearing was that in the United States, according to the United States Sentencing Commission, a government agency that writes federal sentencing laws, guidelines, says that for the same crimes, black individuals are punished 19% harsher. Their sentences are 19 times as long. For the controlling for all the variables about their offense, about their criminal history, black people just get sentenced 19% longer. And so translating that to the judge about what to do with this individual, however, becomes challenging because even accepting those facts as true, the judge has to decide that in a particular case, that's relevant about this individual's experience. And going back to my earlier point about writing this off because every experience is anecdotal or it's not affecting this courtroom with this defendant right now is challenging because, of course, that individual has been subject to this their entire life. Every sentence they've had over the course of their life has been 19% longer.
Right.
In the federal system, when an individual is sentenced for an offense, one of the 2 parts of the matrix is their criminal history. The more severe their criminal history, the longer their prior sentences are, the more harshly they're going to be sentenced now. So what that means is that every time this person has been sentenced with the prior crime that's 19% longer because of their race, their sentence now is going to be that much longer. And so it's an inflating balloon of the problem becoming more and more exacerbated as every judge down the pike sees the longer and longer sentences. One of the things that the court is to consider by statute is that is the characteristic of the defendant that's written into the law. The law is 18 U.S.C. 3553. And one of the things that it says is that
of course, that one, yeah.
I say it every day, right? One of the things that statute says is that the judge has to consider the characteristics of the defendant. Well, this judge said race isn't a characteristic. And the prosecutor said, well, race isn't part of the crime, so we shouldn't make it part of their sentence. But it absolutely is a characteristic of the person when they've been stopped more often, when they've been sentenced more harshly, when they have been convicted of crimes that have been racially biased against them, like the disparity between crack and cocaine, when those laws have been written and disparately impacted those communities. Those are the kinds of things that have affected them and become characteristics of their entire life.
What might be something that the public can do when it comes to the criminal justice system and some of the disparities that you're talking about now?
I think one thing that we can all do is do our best to accept that we all come into the world with a certain level of implicit bias about different people and none of us are, I mean, I include myself in that. As many facts as I've posted, I don't shake the fact that I went to almost an entirely white school. I was raised in an entirely white community. My church was almost entirely white. The way I see the world and the people that I populate in my mind fulfilling different roles are white. That's my sort of imagination. It's my concept of reality. And so one thing I think that we can all do is recognize that our reality isn't like that other people have different experiences, and not so easily peg white people into every positive role in our life that to imagine every individual serving different roles as a white person is perhaps one way to think about implicit bias and trying to better make your outlook on what the world can look like as not the way you've experienced it, because our society is so fractured. I mean, literally. I mean, in Wichita, for example, they're everywhere. Minneapolis is the same way. I mean, there's clear geographic boundaries. You cross one street. Where I went to law school, I couldn't, every day I drove through it. My law school was in an affluent part of Kansas City, but it was only 3 blocks down that it was incredibly disenfranchised. And it changes like that. And noticing those things and realizing them.
Did they address that in the school at all?
No, there's no classes on racial justice. At my law school, there were no classes on racial justice. It's a sad fact. One thing also to maybe address your question too about, or your premise, is that there's so many stages in the process that we need to fix. To give you a snapshot of that, just to point out some of those, if maybe one way to think about this is how often race is injected into the criminal justice system. It's not just that Black people are more likely pulled over or stopped by law enforcement. It's not just that they're more likely to be shot, and it's not just that they're sentenced more harshly. It's all of the steps. So for example, let's just sort of timeline a few of those. A Black individual is more likely to be stopped in their car than a white person by a police officer. When they are stopped, they are more likely to have their vehicle searched on some reasonable suspicion that perhaps that police officer would write off or look past if that individual is white. Hispanic people suffer from the same problem. If contraband is found in their car, it's more likely to be punished harshly because crack cocaine is more often used, for example, in Black communities than cocaine. Those drugs are punished more harshly. So now they've been stopped, searched, and found contraband that's more harshly punished. Now they need to begin their steps in the criminal justice system, where they're appointed an attorney, and the prosecutor that they're negotiating with probably comes to the table with some level of implicit bias. Evidence of that is that one of the stats I pointed out was that Black folks are more likely to be subject to mandatory minimum punishments. So that means that they're more likely to face an offense right out of the gate that requires prison. And so their starting place for negotiating with the prosecutor is higher than somebody else because they're more likely to face a mandatory prison time, and they're negotiating down from that as opposed to negotiating from probation or from diversion. And then when they go to trial, they're less likely to see people of their own race on a jury. And then when they're convicted, if they're convicted, they are more likely to be punished harshly. So every step in the process, it's not just about one discrete thing like you mentioned. It's a holistic system that needs to change. One last point before I ramble on too far on this point is there was a major piece of legislation that was passed a couple of years ago during the Obama administration called the First Step Act. The First Step Act, it made a few changes to the criminal justice process, but it's not going to right all these wrongs. It's probably not going to be legislation that rights all these wrongs. It's going to be about communities caring more about the way that justice is handled, communities speaking out about the way that they see people in their community sentenced, people speaking out about and on behalf of other people in their community when they're treated unfairly, because judges are cognizant always of their retention when they're voted for. If they're in districts where they get revoted, they're constantly cognizant of what the perception of the criminal justice process is. So if people raise those as concerns and protest, if they write the judges and say they're interested in these issues, they care because judges want to reflect their community. So those are ways people can get engaged and things to be aware of.
How do people know if they should vote for a judge who's going to try to defeat that racial disparity in the system?
Right. So much, we have public accesses to court, right? But when's the last time you went into a courtroom and just watched what happened throughout the day to get to know a judge about what's going on, right?
I've seen the People's Court.
Right, exactly. So it's really hard to know what's going on and know what the judges mean when they're on there. How do you know? That's about community engagement. I think, I can't. I have a hard time fathoming that the public defender's office in any jurisdiction is going to start answering phones for concerned citizens that want an overview of their courtroom judges. There's websites that present some of that data, but I think the best way to know, I think the only way to know is to listen to people in your community, go to community events. When your city hall hosts a town hall, show up and ask about the judges in your community. Ask about your municipal court judges. What's their day job? Are they a prosecutor throughout the day, and then in the evening they come to night court and they're a judge? Perhaps there's some bias there. Do they once you know their name, Google them, learn about them. They probably have a public presence. Reach out and get involved and show up at places, I think, is the strongest way to get involved, which is hard. None of those things are part of our normal routine, to suddenly start doing these things. But that would be one way. Hey, I need to interject and fact check myself. The First Step Act I mentioned, I Googled it while I was doing here because I felt uncomfortable at what I said, was passed by President Trump, not by President Obama. So I stand corrected in myself.
Good.
I've learned something.
I'm glad you told us that. I didn't want to get a lot of angry letters.
Right. Me either. Well, I present myself. If I'm being interviewed, I ought to know what I'm talking about. So that was 2018.
During the season of the Pentacouch, I'm on the Pentacouch in Pentecost.
Oh, very nice.
Yes, relaxing with a nice beverage and a fun cup. And I'm wondering, do you have any unique or special cups with you? And what's a unique beverage you've ever tried?
All right, so 2 cups that are always with me, and evidence of that they're right here. The first one is a Star Wars licensed water bottle here that is with me at all times when I'm home. My cats will drink anything that's put in a glass, so we constantly drink out of water bottles in my home. And product number 2 here is a Spectra brand baby bottle, which has become my little daughter's favorite over the past 11 days.
That's the new brand. Wow.
Yes.
I think we had Doc Brown bottles for our bottles.
We've got a couple of those. Haven't tried them. These ones came with my wife's breast pump, and so we've got a bunch of them. So we use them all the time.
How about a unique beverage?
A unique beverage I've tried is Harry Potter Butterbeer at Universal Studios, the Harry Potter park. My wife and I I was at a continuing legal education in Florida. So my wife and I got up at 4 a.m. so that I could take her to Harry Potter World at Universal Studios, which we went to, and drank the butterbeer there many times over the course of several hours. So not super strange, but unique enough for me that it was sort of transplanting. That is a cool place, man.
And she's the Harry Potter fan. You're the Star Wars fan, or?
That's right. Yeah. But I tell you what, if you have the chance to go there, I was not and am not a super huge Harry Potter fan, but the production value at Harry Potter World is off the charts. I mean, you walk through the door into the place and it really is transporting. I mean, it is completely immersive and cool.
I'm sure it's great. I'm going to save my post-pandemic trip money for that Star Wars land in Disney World.
I'll see you there.
Yeah. Well, excellent. Thank you so much, Mitch. We appreciate the work that you're doing as a public defender, and we thank you for giving us more insight into some of the systemic change that continues to need to happen on a broader level. Thank you so much.
Sure, of course. And all the posts that I'm making on Facebook are public, and you can just find me there by my name. So go and read the stuff I posted, shoot me comments, let me know that my sources are junk, and we'll talk about it. I'd be happy to go through it and learn something from you too.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much to Mitch Beebe-Hauser for being our guest tonight, and thank you to you for being our guest for Camp Meetings. I hope that you had a good experience. I'm Reverend Nate Melcher of Richfield United Methodist Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. You can learn more about experiencing online worship at richfieldumc.org/live, and you can support our ministries at richfieldumc.org/give. Stick around for 2 bonus dad jokes from the kids after a song from Victor. Take care of each other out there, friends. And as our band leader John Wesley would say, the best of all is God is with us. Go with God, my friends.
Here's a terrific old hymn. It's based on an old Scottish melody. It's called The Summons. Beautiful tune. Will you come and follow me if I but call your name? Will you go where you don't know and never be the same? Will you let my love be shown? Will you let my name be known? Will you let my life be grown in you and you in me? Will you leave yourself behind if I but call your name? Will you care for cruel and kind and never be the same? Will you risk the hostile stare? Should your life attract or scare? Will you let me answer prayer in you and you in me? Thanks, everybody. Take care. Until next time.
Why did the crab cross the road? Because the chicken was on vacation.
What did the ocean say to the shore? Nothing. It just waves. Get it? Cause it's the ocean and waves. Like you're surfing on a wave.
Good one.